You never expect to get treated like a criminal for fishing in your own backyard. But that's exactly what happened. It was a calm Sunday morning. Mist curled over the lake like a sleeping giant's breath, sunlight barely kissing the water's surface. My mansion sat behind me, a sprawling lakeside home I'd dreamed about since I was 22, the kind of place you work decades for. And yet, standing on my own dock rod in hand, I heard the words no homeowner should ever hear. "Sir, you're going to need to put that down." I turned, not to see a police officer, but Karen, the Karen HOA, president queen of laminated rules and self-proclaimed defender of community standards. She wasn't smiling. In fact, she was already dialing her phone. And in less than 10 minutes, the real cops were pulling up my driveway. Apparently, my private lake was community property and my dock was not for fishing. According to Karen, I was in violation of 3 HOA bylaws and subject to fines, penalties, and possible legal action. I could have argued right then, but I didn't. Because the truth was, I already knew something. Karen didn't. Something that would turn this little fishing dispute into a $1.6 million disaster. For her. And I was more than happy to wait. The thing about Karen was, she didn't introduce herself. She announced herself. The first time we met, I was unloading moving boxes from my truck. She marched up the driveway in a visor, clipboard in hand, flanked by a nervous-looking man I assumed was her husband, or possibly her hostage. "Hi, I'm Karen, president of the HOA. We do have standards here." That was the entire introduction. No welcome to the neighborhood. No beautiful house you've got here, just a veiled warning wrapped in a pastel polo shirt. I smiled, thanked her, and got back to work. I didn't know it yet, but in Karen's mind, that smile was already strike one. She expected compliance, apologies, maybe even an offer to join the HOA board. But my problem was simple. I'd bought the house without any intention of being part of her fiefdom. My property, all 5 acres of it, sat on the edge of the lake, but the deed showed something unusual. My land extended into the water, a private dock, private fishing rights, private everything. Except Karen didn't see it that way. Over the next few weeks, I got little reminders of her presence. A notice tucked under my door about dock safety inspections. A letter citing inappropriate landscaping because I had wildflowers instead of perfectly trimmed turf. An email. Yes, she somehow found my email suggesting I attend the community orientation. I ignored all of it, until that Sunday morning. When the cops arrived, they were polite but clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, we got a call about a trespasser fishing without permission," one of them said, side-eyeing the mansion behind me. "I'm guessing this is your place." I handed over my ID. "It is. And the dock and the lake water around it." Karen jumped in like she was the lead prosecutor on a murder trial. "That lake belongs to the community. It's in the bylaws." The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, this ID says he owns the property. Not the water," she snapped. "That's shared. If we let him fish, what's next? Jet skis, houseboats, chaos." It was absurd. The officer knew it. I knew it. Karen just didn't care. The cops left without writing anything. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. 2 days later, I got my first official fine from the HOA. $250 for unauthorized use of community resources. It was signed in looping cursive, Karen L. Henderson, HOA president. I laughed and didn't pay it. A week later, another fine. $500. This time for failure to comply with prior violation notice. Then came the letters, each thicker than the last, stuffed with printed bylaws, highlighted paragraphs, and bolded threats of legal action. I'd barely been in the house a month, and already she was turning my mailbox into a war zone. One afternoon, I was fixing a loose board on my dock when I noticed her, standing at the far end of the cul-de-sac, binoculars in hand. She wasn't even hiding. She waved. I waved back. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about fishing. Karen was marking territory, and in her mind I was an invader. The warnings escalated. One morning I woke up to find a laminated sign zip-tied to my dock post. "No fishing. HOA Rule 14B. Violators subject to fines and removal." The zip ties were tight, industrial grade. She wanted me to know it wasn't coming off without effort. I cut it down and tossed it in the trash. 2 days later, there were 2 signs. Then 4. It wasn't just the dock anymore. She started filing complaints about my outdoor lighting being too bright, about my trash bins being visible from the street, about the color of my deck chairs, apparently aesthetically inconsistent with the neighborhood palette. Every little thing became ammo. My friends started noticing. "Dude, you've got your own HOA stalker," my buddy Mike said, half joking. "You should put up cameras." I did. And within a week, I had footage of Karen walking onto my dock, clipboard in hand, measuring tape swinging from her wrist. She was taking notes. I finally decided to push back, just a little. The next time she came onto my property, I walked out with a cooler and a folding chair, plopped it right next to where she was inspecting, and started fishing. I didn't say a word. Her jaw tightened. You're making this worse for yourself. I smiled, just enjoying my lake. She stormed off without another word. The following morning, I found something floating in the water by my dock. A dead fish belly up with a bright orange zip tie around its tail. Message received. It would have been easy to call the police right then, but I didn't. Because by now I was realizing something important. Karen wasn't just violating my peace. She was violating the law. And if I played this right, I could turn every one of her petty moves into a noose. She was willingly tightening around her own neck. So I started collecting everything. Every letter, every fine, every photo of her on my dock, video of her trespassing, recordings of our conversations. I didn't know exactly where it would lead yet, but I knew this. Karen was making a mistake she couldn't afford, and she was about to make it much bigger. Karen's next move made it clear she wasn't just trying to annoy me, she was trying to break me. It started with the community meeting. I hadn't planned on going. The last thing I wanted was 2 hours of HOA members, debating flower beds and mailbox heights. But then I got the email, attendance required, for all homeowners in violation of current bylaws. I showed up early, partly to make a point, partly to see how far she'd take it. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a beige, over-air-conditioned room with folding chairs in perfect rows. Karen sat at the front behind a table stacked with papers. A banner on the wall read, "Maintaining harmony in our neighborhood." The irony could have choked a horse. She called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a slideshow. 30 minutes of rules, infractions, and community impact. Every third slide had my address on it. And this homeowner's failure to comply is setting a dangerous precedent, she said, clicking to a photo of me, on my dock, fishing rod in hand. Gasps rippled through the room. I raised my hand. You do realize that's my dock on my property and the water is deeded to me. Karen's smile was razor thin. The HOA's jurisdiction is not subject to personal interpretation. Oh, I'm not interpreting. I said, I'm reading my deed. Murmurs started. A couple of neighbors glanced at each other. Karen's eyes flicked to her notes, then back to me. We will be issuing further penalties. This is not optional. I left the meeting with a folder full of new fines, now totaling over $2,000, and a sinking suspicion that Karen wasn't acting alone. The next week confirmed it. One morning my mailbox was empty. Not just no mail, empty, door hanging open, flag bent, hinge broken, empty, every letter gone. The postmaster later told me they'd received multiple complaints, that my mailbox was improperly placed, and had ordered it removed until it could be reevaluated. Guess whose name was on the complaint form? Then came the mystery contractor. I woke up to the sound of drilling, stepped outside, and found a guy in a neon vest halfway through installing a lock on my dock gate. Who sent you? I asked. Show, he said. Said you needed controlled access. I laughed so hard I had to lean on the railing. Yeah, you can stop right there. This is private property. He shrugged, packed up and left. By noon, I had an email from Karen, accusing me of obstructing authorized HOA maintenance. It would have been funny if it wasn't so exhausting. She escalated the fines weekly now. $2,000 became $4,000, then $6,000. The letters got nastier, laced with phrases like legal recourse, foreclosure proceedings, and revocation of property privileges. It was all bark. I knew the HOA couldn't actually take my house over fishing, but bark gets loud when it's constant. I started feeling it. The low-grade anxiety every time I saw her SUV creep by. The tightening in my chest when my phone dinged with another notice of violation. Then she made her first real mistake. One Friday evening, I was grilling on the patio when my neighbor Linda wandered over. She's one of the few people here I actually like, kind, straightforward, and not scared of Karen. You didn't hear this from me, she said, but Karen, he's been using HOA funds to pay for a lawyer to build a case against you. I raised an eyebrow. HOA funds, as in everyone's dues. Linda nodded. She told the board it was a community protection matter. They didn't vote on it. She just did it. That was the moment something shifted in my head, because using HOA money without authorization, that's not petty. That's criminal misappropriation. And suddenly I didn't just have a stalker with a clipboard. I had leverage. Still, she wasn't done. The very next morning, I found my dock wrapped in caution tape, bright yellow strung in crisscross patterns like a crime scene. Pinned to the railing was a laminated dock closed notice with her signature. I ripped it all down, tossed it on her front lawn, and went fishing. That night, someone egged my house. Not just a couple of eggs. We're talking dozens. My siding, my windows, my mailbox post, all dripping. The cameras caught the culprit. And it wasn't Karen. It was her teenage son. I could have called the police right then, but instead, I saved the footage in a folder labeled HOA War Exhibit C because by now, I had Exhibit A trespassing, Exhibit B misuse of HOA funds, and Exhibit C property vandalism linked to the HOA president's household. All I needed was one more push, one more stupid, reckless move from her, and I'd have everything I needed to end this. That push came 3 days later. I was in my office when the sound of an engine idling caught my ear. I looked out the window and saw a tow truck backing into my driveway. I went outside. "Morning," the driver said. "Here for the boat." I stared at him. "What boat?" He pointed at my dock. "That one." "That boat," I said slowly, "is mine." "And you're trespassing." The driver looked uncomfortable. "Lady from the HOA said it was abandoned and a safety hazard. Paid for removal in cash." I smiled. "You're going to want to leave before I call the sheriff. And you might want to ask for ID next time before taking someone's property." He left. But Karen had just given me Exhibit D, attempted unlawful seizure of private property. That night I sat at my kitchen table with all my evidence spread out like a detective board. Photos, emails, videos, witness statements, HOA bylaws with her own signatures contradicting her actions. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to take her down so hard she'd wish the only thing I did was fish. And the best part, she was about to help me do it. The first step was simple paperwork. If Karen loved rules so much, I was going to bury her under them. I went down to the county records office with 2 goals. Confirm the boundaries of my property and request every HOA filing for the past 5 years. The clerk, a cheerful woman with glasses chained around her neck, didn't even blink. "Pull up a chair," she said, sliding over a stack of manila folders big enough to choke a shredder. That's where I found it. Page after page of HOA expenditures, many with Karen's signature. Landscaping invoices to her cousin's company. Catering bills for board lunches that suspiciously matched her favorite restaurant. And of course, the legal retainer for the case against me, paid from HOA funds without a recorded vote. Step 2, allies. Linda was the first to join me. Then came Tom, a retired firefighter, who'd been fined $500 for unauthorized holiday decorations. And Sarah, a single mom who'd been threatened with lien proceedings over excessive noise when her toddler cried. We met in my living room, coffee mugs and hand-swapping war stories. By the end of the night, we had a shared folder with copies of every letter, fine, and photo we could find. It wasn't just me Karen had been targeting. It was anyone who didn't fall in line. Step 3, authority. I scheduled a meeting with the county code enforcement officer, the sheriff's department, and, my personal favorite, the state attorney's office. I didn't go in empty-handed. I brought a binder neatly tabbed Exhibit A trespassing footage, Exhibit B HOA fund misuse documentation, Exhibit C vandalism video courtesy of her son, Exhibit D attempted seizure of my boat, Exhibit E witness statements from neighbors. The state attorney's investigator flipped through the binder like he was skimming a menu. You know, he said this looks a lot like misappropriation of funds, criminal trespass, and harassment. I smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. While the legal wheels began turning, I worked on the psychological part of the plan. I knew Karen couldn't resist a stage, so I gave her one. I drafted a letter to the entire neighborhood inviting them to a special HOA review session, a polite, formal-sounding meeting that just so happened to be fully compliant with HOA bylaws. I included a single tantalizing line. All members are encouraged to attend as important information regarding HOA leadership will be presented. Printed copies and hand-delivered them, making sure Karen's was the very last one. Her reaction was immediate. She called me within an hour. "What is this meeting?" "HOA business," I said. "Just keeping everyone informed. You can't call a meeting without my approval." "Actually," I said, tapping the bylaws on my desk, "any homeowner can call a special session, with written notice to all members." Section 3, paragraph 4. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "You're making a mistake." "See you Tuesday," I said and hung up. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Standing room only. The usual sleepy crowd of a dozen was now 50 strong, buzzing with curiosity. Karen sat at the front, stiff-backed lips pressed so tight they looked painted on. I stepped up to the podium with my binder. "Neighbors," I began. "I've called this meeting to share some concerning information regarding our HOA's recent actions." And then I laid it out, slide by slide, date by date, trespassing, harassment, fines without cause, and the crown jewel, unauthorized use of HOA funds for personal legal battles. Gasps turned to murmurs, murmurs turned to outright whispers. Karen tried to interrupt 3 times, but each time, I handed her a printed copy of the bylaw I was quoting. She had nothing. By the end, the room was boiling. Tom stood up. "I move that we suspend the current HOA president pending a full audit." Sarah seconded it. Hands went up. Almost every single one. Karen sat frozen, eyes darting like she was looking for a hidden escape hatch. But the vote was recorded, and just like that, her authority was gone. It was satisfying, but it wasn't over. Because while the neighborhood now knew The truth, the county and the state attorney were still working. And I knew that when their investigation wrapped, it wouldn't just be her title she'd lose. It would be her bank account. The next morning, I got a call from the investigator. "We've confirmed misuse of funds. You'll want to be at the next county board hearing." "Oh," I said, looking out at my dock, the lake shimmering in the morning light. I wouldn't miss it. I could almost picture it. Karen cornered not by me, but by the very rules she'd weaponized against everyone else. And when that day came, I already knew exactly what I was going to say. The county board hearing wasn't glamorous. Fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs, the faint smell of burnt coffee. But the energy in the room? Electric. Karen walked in first. Tailored blazer, pearl necklace, chin high. She was flanked by a man in a cheap suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Her lawyer, I guessed. I was already seated at the front binder. Open, every tab color-coded. Like a military operation. Linda, Tom, Sarah. They were right behind me, a quiet wall of support. The board chair, a silver-haired woman with the kind of voice that made you sit up straighter, called the hearing to order. Today's agenda: review of alleged misconduct and financial misappropriation by the Lakeshore Estates HOA president. Karen cleared her throat. "These accusations are baseless. This is a personal vendetta." The chair raised a hand. "Mrs. Henderson, you will have time to respond. First, we will hear the evidence." And then, for the second time in as many weeks, I got to walk an audience through the binder. It was glorious. Every video clip projected onto the wall. Karen trespassing, measuring my dock, her son throwing eggs at my house. Every receipt and bank record. The landscaping contract to her cousin, the restaurant. Bills, the legal retainer to fight my fishing. Every bylaw she'd violated read aloud by the board chair in a tone that made them sound like guilty verdicts. When it was her turn to speak, Karen's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. I was protecting the community from people like him." She jabbed a finger at me. The chair's eyebrows arched. "People who own their property and abide by the law." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Someone even clapped. Quickly stifled, but loud enough to make Karen's lawyer wince. Then came the investigator from the state attorney's office. He stepped up with a folder and a calm, deadly voice. "Our office has concluded that Mrs. Henderson engaged in repeated acts of misappropriation of HOA funds, criminal trespass, and harassment of multiple residents." Karen's lawyer leaned in to whisper to her, but the investigator kept going. "We will be filing formal charges for the misappropriation, which under state law carries penalties, including restitution fines and potential jail time." Gasps, and then silence. The kind of silence you get when everyone realizes they're watching a slow-motion car crash. The board chair turned to Karen. "Effective immediately. You are removed as HOA president. You will reimburse the HOA $68,000 in misused funds, and you are barred from holding any position of authority in any HOA within this county for life." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The gavel came down. Bang! It was over. Well, almost over. As we all stood to leave, I walked past her. She wouldn't look at me, but I stopped anyway. "Karen," I said quietly, "you remember the day you called the cops on me for fishing?" She didn't answer. I smiled. "That was the cheapest mistake you made? This one cost you $1.6 million in legal fees, restitution, and lost property value. When your house goes up for sale." Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. But I was already walking away. The fallout was immediate. By the end of the week, a for sale sign was in her yard. Rumor had it her husband, the silent man from our first meeting, had filed for separation. The HOA newsletter announced an emergency audit of all past spending. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before stopped me on the street to shake my hand. "You saved us," one said. I just smiled and thought, no. She saved me the trouble by being herself. The best part? The lake was mine again. That Sunday I went down to the dock, cooler in hand, and cast my line into the glassy water. The sun was just breaking the horizon, the mist curling away like smoke. And for the first time in months, it was quiet. That's when Linda wandered over with her coffee. "You know, she said you should name a fish after her." I laughed. "Yeah, but which one? The one that bites too soon, or the one that can't keep its mouth shut?" We both cracked up. Karen would have her day in court, but I didn't need to be there for that. My part was done. The evidence was in. The dock was mine. Justice served cold, and with a fishing rod in hand. It's funny how something as simple as fishing can turn into a war. A war of letters, fines, and zip-tied signs. A war that ended not with shouting, but with signatures on legal documents and a gavel hitting wood. Looking back, I realized this wasn't really about fishing at all. It was about control. Karen needed to be the queen of the cul-de-sac. The final word on what was allowed, and who belonged. The problem was, she forgot the one rule: no HOA. Bylaw can override. When you break the law, you lose your power. For months, she pushed, bullied, and escalated, thinking I'd either give in or give up. And maybe if she'd just left it at the first fine, I would have ignored her forever. But she couldn't stop. Every little move she made was another piece of rope she wrapped around herself. By the end, I didn't have to beat her. I just had to let her finish tying the knot, and then hand it to the people who could pull it tight. I still get asked if it was worth it. All the meetings, the paperwork, the stress. Here's my answer. The day. I sat on my dock again without caution tape or Karen's SUV, idling nearby, and dropped a line into the water. That was worth it. Not because I won, but because she lost in the exact way she'd tried to make me lose. Publicly, officially, and permanently. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the new HOA president. It was a simple 2-sentence note. Congratulations on your property rights being upheld. The HOA will no longer interfere with your lake access. We appreciate your cooperation moving forward. I framed it, not out of pettiness. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly as a reminder that some fights aren't about ego. They're about planting a flag and saying this far, no further. If there's a takeaway here, it's this. You don't have to raise your voice to win. Sometimes the smartest move is to let the other person dig their own hole, and then simply step aside when they fall in. Or, as my grandfather used to say when we went fishing, patience catches the biggest ones. Now I'm curious, if you were in my shoes, would you have gone to war over a dock? Or would you have just paid the fine and moved on? Drop your answer in the comments, and let's see how many justice-served folks made it to the end. And if you ever find yourself staring down a Karen with a clipboard, remember, keep calm, keep records, and if possible, keep fishing.